The Connection Show. Inspiring. Hope. Health. Healing. Sponsored by Brave Heart Workshops. Live with Jill Reynolds. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like our page. Share it. Subscribe to it now and click the bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming shows.
The Connection Show, inspiring hope, health, and healing, sponsored by Braveheart Workshops Live with Jill Reynolds. And joining me today from the great state of Texas is Matt Wallace. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Well, I'd like the audience to know just a short part of your bio, so I'm going to read a little bit of who Matt is. He is a producer, a director, a creator, and a writer who has traveled to over 30 countries around the world. Matt has worked in higher education, corporate America, and for non-for-profit organizations. While his formal training and work have been often technology-based, he's also produced and directed various TV film productions and has been a media producer for most of his adult life. Currently, Matt can typically be found on production sets, helping to produce high-end TV commercials. He's also written his own book. So that's a little bit about Matt. So thank you so much for joining us, Matt. And one of the things people say when they come on the show is, what are we going to talk about? So what we love to do on the Connection Show is we love to inspire hope, health, and healing in the world. And through that, we really believe that when Jesus walked the face of the earth, he loved to share stories, accounts, and parables for the purpose of those who listened to him talk would have transformation in their life by hearing the similarities in the story with their own life instead of the differences. So if you're willing, Matt, would you be willing to be transparent and share the good, the bad, and the ugly of your life growing up and how that transformed you into the amazing human being you are today? So can you take us back to little Matt growing up?
Oh, wow. My parents were both school teachers. I'm an only child, and we lived in a small town in West Texas. So I was very, very blessed to grow up in an oil-filled town that had an amazing tax base and the highest paid teachers, the best equipment, everything we had in my small hometown of 10,000 was top notch. And so my parents are both very good teachers. I actually had both of them at one time or another. My dad was head of the science department in the middle school and was a planetarium director. My mom was head of social studies department in the high school. And I had both of them, and they were excellent teachers. I grew up in a really, really nice place in that life was pretty much tied to school, and the school was fantastic. So I don't know how to describe, when you were talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly, I was a generally good kid growing up. I do remember I went to church camp when I was right before high school, and I'd been in church my whole life, but never really quite put all the pieces together. So I actually actively, declared my love for Christ and what I would call became a Christian, and did that before I was in high school. And my parents actually rededicated their lives about a year after that. They saw some changes in me. So I don't know that I was an awful kid, but I did have, we all have room to improve. So that's kind of how I started out. And been blessed by a lot of.
Yeah, so with that, Matt, and sometimes it happens later on in life. So in scripture it says, in this world there'll be troubles. And I also really am a believer where scripture talks about that we'll be faced with 4 generations of sin from our forefathers. So from our parents to our grandparents to our great grandparents to our great great grandparents. So none of us get through life in total wellness. So with your life, has there been a place that you could put a finger on where you struggled or had pain and suffering that you called out to God and said, "Get me through this one"?
I would say I think in a classic sense, I've been blessed much of my life, and that struggles, yes, and I would have to say one of my biggest struggles uh, at a couple different times in my life had to do with my understanding of organized religion and the church and the inconsistencies I saw in what was in the Bible and how organized religion behaved. Now, I don't have any like awful stories that I personally can experience, convey, but I've seen a lot, and I would say in the early 90s, my wife and I started doing a lot of support of missionaries and ministers. My wife and I feel like over the years we've learned that we have been called to minister to ministers. And so we connect with full-time ministry people quite easily. And I think they feel that we have an empathy for them because we've seen the behind the scenes. We've seen kind of really awful stuff. And still my faith in God is not the issue. My problem is with how we as humans tend to behave. And then when you slap Jesus' name or God's name on our bad behavior, I just kind of get angry. So I would say I had some really strong struggles, to say the least, multiple times, where I didn't want to be called a Christian. I'm like, that's what people hear when they hear that term, and what I think I care about are not the same.
Mm.
So I'd say some of those struggles are pretty hard. I also was in corporate America and that was a really, really difficult time. I was working ridiculous hours. I was probably 10 years younger than most of my peers at at the level I was in the organization. And it was very, very, very difficult. We had small children. Um, my wife and I struggled. I don't know how that would have worked if we would have stayed in that environment. So, but I felt like God called me to do something in ministry full time, so I ended up leaving that. And I'd like to think that I didn't run away from the problems, but I ran to being obedient. But the awful scenarios that I was dealing with in the corporate world made it easier to say yes. I hope that's that was a
Yeah.
situation. So
Yeah,
I don't
that
know. I've been very, very blessed in a lot of regards, but I'm a passionate guy, and when I see something that's not right, I struggle with it. And unfortunately, a lot of that struggle has been with organized religion and Christians.
Well,
But
what I had gone to a conference back in the 80s, Matt, that was, you remember going to certain conferences over the years, and you might have heard one or two things that stayed with you for a lifetime, that no
yeah,
matter how many things you've put in your brain, that's the one thing that comes back. And so the one topic I loved in the 80s, it was an adult children of alcoholic conference, but the who's who in recovery was there. Patrick Barnes for sexual addiction, Judy Hollis for eating disorders, Claudia Black was there for adult children of alcoholics, John Bradshaw. So the who's who, and Sharon Wegscheider Cruz, who was the founder of Sculpting the Family Tree for the responsible child, the lost child, the mascot, and the scapegoat. And so when I was there, she had a topic called Codependency in the Looking Good Family. It looks good, it smells good, but is there any other things behind the codependency? So years later, Matt, I was privileged to go to treatment for codependency. And the definition I finally came to the conclusion of that codependency means is when we allow people, places, or things to become more important than ourselves, we lose our identity. So as you were sharing, what was coming to me, the places that people put before themselves many times can be our jobs and or our church, where people become addicted and they go to church 7 days a week and da 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 da. But also things in life can be sex and drugs and alcohol, pornography, shopping, excessive exercise, food, and workaholism. So it sounds to me like you lived in this really phenomenal family, but at some point, codependency came in and rooted its ugly roots into the workaholism part, which then starts to mold into a slight identity shift. And, like you said, you didn't have as much time to be with the people who are the most important in your life, which was your wife and your kids, until a shift took place in your life. Would that be accurate to say?
The codependency thing, I don't think anybody who I know in this world who diagnoses people like that would have said I was codependent. I being out of whack, that's not a problem. And sometimes you get sucked into it. It wasn't like I was trying to get away from my family and work. The job was literally that demanding, and it was unreasonable. And so that was just a difficult time.
Yeah.
And so, but like I said, I think God understood who we are and what we were needing, and we had already demonstrated ourselves to be trying to be obedient. And so I think the thing that you hit on there, though, that's important is when people put anything in the spot that God's supposed to be in. I mean, it could be anything.
Mm-hmm.
Along those lines of all those kinds of lists of things that people struggle with, I would say that I'm a glutton. I want to do everything. I want to eat everything. I want to go everywhere. I want to see everybody. I want everything. And in as much as anybody can do that and not be totally screwed up, I've done a lot of stuff. I've got a lot of friends. I've been a lot of places, and I feel like, luckily, a lot of those things have been directly in response to me trying to be obedient, and God's taken me places. We were talking earlier about things that stuck with you. When I was in high school, I was involved in a church group, and I ended up being the personal handler of a revival preacher. I drove and got him. I was the one that drove him back. And I spent time with this guy. I don't remember his name, but I just remember talking to him about that classic question of what's God's will. And he was like, consider praying that he will make his desires your desires, so that you're doing what you want to do, but it's also what God wants you to do. And that made a big impression on me. And so I can't say that everything I want to do is of God. I know that's not true, but I would say that a lot of the things that I've seen God bless over the years and things that have been done were things that I felt like I was made to do. I was wired that way. And so when I felt that call or I heard something that indicated that maybe I needed to do this or that, it wasn't a big stretch. And so I've been blessed by a lot of things. I mean, the film that's in this film festival that kind of led to me getting invited here on this is I wasn't looking to do that project. That was something that just kind of unfolded in the relationships. And then one person asked for one thing, and then they're saying, hey, we want you to do this. And I'm like, I don't know. So, I mean, you go through the time of asking, does God want me to do this? Or did this person want me to do this? And but in the end, I wanted to do it. And I'm convinced that, God called me and my wife and, my network to do this thing. And so that's an example.
Could you share with the audience, because they don't have a clue what you're talking about?
Sure.
What is the film And first off, we'll pause for a moment and first let the audience know that there is going to be a film festival in Branson, Missouri. And I'll just show the flyer really quickly on that. And the film festival is April 21st to 23rd at the Copeland Theater at the Meadows in Branson, Missouri on Gretna Road. And the website for the film festival is bransonfilmfestival.com, which is where you can get tickets. Also, while I have you here, I'm going to show real quick Matt's bio, full bio, and his two websites that you can reach him at. So coming back to you, Matt, tell us a little bit about how you got invited to the film festival and what is it that you're going to be presenting there?
Well, I mean, there's a universally used system called Film Freeway that filmmakers submit projects to that help you more quickly find audiences that might be interested in seeing whatever you've produced. So in this particular case, I've had a couple of other films that I've gone through with Film Freeway. And so I already had an account, had everything, and I wasn't really looking to market this film, but I was just looking through there and seeing different projects. I was like, well, that might make sense. And so when you make a film, when you have a project like that, and you've poured so much time and effort into it, you want people to see it. It's not like an ego thing. You just think, well, I tried to make something that's worth watching, and here's a place that theoretically people want to watch film. So I love going to film festivals. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it to the one in Branson, but so I submitted the film, and it got picked up by this particular, film festival. So that's how it happened. And as far as the project itself, my daughter invited me to meet some people. Actually, we had met this guy earlier in Thailand, right before COVID really kicked in. We were helping run a conference in Thailand, and this guy happened to be there. And my daughter helped run that conference. My wife and daughter did all the music. I was doing tech stuff, and we met this guy. Thought he was great. Didn't think anything else about it, and then we ended up going to their house, and it was in Tampa. And so they said, "Hey, we want you to shoot some video of what's going on here." And I'm like, okay. I can't say that I'm always in a big hurry to take on new projects, but I leave the door open, and so I did, and I was really compelled by what I saw there. And simply put, the film is a documentary talking about how disciple-making movement principles, church planting movement principles, people are trying to apply it in North America, and there are well over 1,000 documented multi-generational, multi-stream movements that are happening around the world. And unfortunately, they don't tend to grow as quickly in North America. And the unfortunate reason is there are too many churches. And there are certain dynamics at play. So there are people who have really been trying to live this out and pursue these principles, these truths, this approach to living out a Christian life. And they're trying to do it in North America. And it doesn't look like it does in the Middle East or in India or in Africa. It does. I mean, there's certain fundamental concepts that are universal, but culturally there are some differences that you kind of have to figure out. And so there's this group. I mean, there's a couple of groups that have multi-generational things happening in North America, but there's one in Tampa, and all I did was document it. So I pursued. I had a friend that was a preacher, excellent preacher. He had been our preacher. Guy, he's got a PhD in theology, and he is a fantastic preacher. He'd done the big church, the little church, done all this kind of stuff. And I used him as kind of a vehicle because he believed in these principles. And I used him as a way to navigate his journey and trying to figure out how to do this. And so it's difficult to produce a feature-length film when it's primarily talking heads. I mean, there are no car chases. There's no whodunit. It is literally you're trying to introduce people and ideas to the audience in a compelling way. And that's what we did. And so in the end, I think a lot of people have been blessed by it. But like I said, there's this whole audience of people who are in these networks that wanted to see this, and it's encouraged them. But there's a whole lot of other people who care about their faith, follow Christ, but aren't in those networks. So I figured film festival, since they love Jesus,
Yeah.
might be a place. And
what is the name of the film, Matt?
love one another until the whole world knows.
Love one another till the whole world knows. And that will be one of the featured films that you can watch and screen at the film festival.
I don't know how featured it is. It was accepted. I've done film festivals, and it's one thing. It's wonderful when you're selected to a film festival. That doesn't mean that you're featured. That doesn't mean you win anything. But just being invited to a film festival is fine because it will be screened there. But when a film wins something, it is featured, if you will. So
that's awesome.
Like I said, yeah.
And then tell us a little bit. I put the tagline on here because I saw it on your website of how do you deal with varying opinions and minimize the suck? So I thought that was an interesting.
Okay,
so talk about this book.
All right. So there's two different. I apologize for people who are easily offended. Sometimes I think the word suck is very descriptive and just is good when you're describing certain situations. And minimizing the suck was part of an article I wrote about COVID-19. And so early on, like in April, I think, of 2020, I wrote an article because I was seeing dynamics. In 1997, I left American Airlines, managing director of Sabre Technology Services, and I helped build the very first virtual private network on the planet for missionaries. And you're dealing with strong personalities. They're in places in the world where what people do around them and how people behave with certain guidelines can have everything to do with their own personal security, the security of the people that they're working with. And it's a important emotion-filled topic. And I saw how different people lived out their security issues and what they were trying to do. And God loved missionaries. They're a hard-headed bunch, and they have differing opinions. And some people would handle the security very different than they would others, but they need to work together. And I saw dynamics in that process that I started seeing popping up in the way people were responding to COVID-19. And it was like a massive flashback. I mean, I just was like, oh my gosh, this is not going to be fun. And so I wrote an article talking about what I think you can do to minimize how sucky this was going to be. And I knew right off the bat that this was not going to be fun, but there are ways to behave that make it less awful. And if I think 2 or 3 months ago, I went back and read my list of 10 things to do. I'm going to stand by them. I think they held up quite well with all of the different waves of attitudes and approaches and all the different everything.
So what were a few that you remember?
I don't remember. I wrote it. I put it in an article. Yeah,
I know.
Like the simple concept was something along the line of find the people in your immediate circle and try to get on the same page with them, because they're the ones you are going to really be living with in and out. And know that you're going to need to flex a little bit. You're going to have to give and take a little bit to find something. So that was one of the things. It's just do everything you can to get on the same page with the people you live with.
Yeah, at least have at least have some commonality, because there's going to be people who are like, I'll just say it for myself, with my health issues of having, factor V blood clotting disorder, and having had COVID myself and being hospitalized the first round, The minute that thing called a shot came out and people were getting it, my two medical doctors said to me, we really don't think you should get it because you're more high at risk and then people would say to me, like, well, you mean you're not going to get it if you have a compromised immune system? I said, no, I don't want a blood clot, and I already have nodules on my lungs, and I've already had a pulmonary embolism, and I've already had COVID. And so no, 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 no. I need my natural immunities to keep me alive. And so I had to find commonality of people who felt the same way as me, that my immune system is God blessed and I'm going to be okay. And, I'm not afraid.
Well, the thing is that there could be someone who has a very similar situation to you who had come to a very different conclusion.
Exactly.
And that was what happened with these missionaries regarding security. And it was just difficult. You had to keep in mind who believed what, and then God forbid, and that's funny when you say that with a bunch of missionaries, but God forbid, you had totally different people on the same team and couldn't agree on things. And it was, so I wrote that article, and it was called How to Minimize the Suck. And then the other reference I think you made is that on the back cover of a book I wrote, and I think it's called 13 Things You Can Do That Are Better Than Your Moral Outrage on Social Media, or something like this. It's a ridiculously long title, intended to be ridiculously long and make you chuckle, because it's but on the back of it, I said the first thing I try to do on any project I do is try not to suck. If you're trying to do anything, you want to at least clear that bar. And of course you want to do much better. You want to be excellent, but on the road to being excellent, first thing is you can't be awful. And so I think those are the two references.
And it's funny when you were sharing earlier about stuff with being a Christian. I remember one of my hardest things to overcome as a Christian was my swearing. I grew up in a house I grew up in a home, and I'm not exaggerating, that every word that proceeded out of my mother's mouth was the suck word, only with an F. And so then I got into the shipping industry, air freight and truck freight, the travel industry. And
you already knew the language.
And everyone said that word. So I became a Christian, and I'm telling you, Matt, and I still struggle with it at times, not as bad, that I'll have a conversation and just that flies. And so, and then with it, for some reason, when I saw Top Gun, I loved the line, I have a need for speed. There's something in me that loves to drive as fast as I can on the highway. And I can't stand it when I come behind or front, and someone in front of me drives less than the minimal speed limit.
Right.
And I feel like or the Wells, where he'd go road hog, road hog, and I'm dying to get out of my car and get him to go faster. So for years, I would never in my wildest dream have anything on my car representing Christianity.
I am a firm believer that if you care about anything, don't put that sticker on your car, because nobody is going to see you pass or do something in your car and go, oh, look at those Green Bay Packer fans. Oh, they're driving so well. I appreciate them all the more. That's never going to happen. But if they don't like what you did, whether or not it's merited or not, they're definitely going to equate whatever you care about with something negative. So I am a firm believer of not putting any kind of logo on your car. Yep. It doesn't achieve what I think some people think it achieves.
Yep. The judgment is so big out there. It's unbelievable how we have a spirit of judgment.
Yeah. Well, in some cases, I feel justified in being judgmental, but I know that's not a thing. But sometimes when somebody does certain things, I'm like, that's not how you're supposed to drive. And I have a tendency to appreciate your approach to driving, and I I like it when the slower people stay in the right lanes. I know
Mhm.
on the German Autobahn, I was like, this is awesome. They know how to drive here. Like
Yeah.
if you're slower, doesn't matter what slower is, but
Yeah,
if you're
and
slower,
and
you stay in the right.
people just don't get that the left lane is for passing, not staying in the, and it's like where did you go to driver school? You
Yeah,
drive
they don't.
in the right lane for slow, the middle lane for driving, and the left lane for passing. What part of this do you not get?
Yeah,
You
yeah, yeah.
know,
So
I'm
the Germans drive like crazy, but I'm convinced that that's safer because they absolutely follow that rule because it's important. Because if you don't follow that rule, people die.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I don't know how we got to talking about that, but
Well, I'm
yeah.
from Chicago originally, so you could already tell from the expressways. But anyway, well, tell us what other projects you're working on now, because I know you have this unbelievable ability to multitask. I can tell it in you. So I know you've got like 6 projects going at one time. So what are you working on now?
All right. Well, I guess this is a time to. I want to try to possibly plug a couple of things that are not necessarily mine, but I'm helping with. There's a film that I helped finish up out of Kyrgyzstan, Mahabat. I hope that it's going to be in festivals coming up, but they got kind of stuck, and I helped them get unstuck. And it's a feature length film about this lady that got sold into trafficking and all kinds of horrible things. And it's a cautionary tale. She's talking to a young lady. It's these guys shot it on next to nothing budget, and so they got stuck. And I just said this is wrong. So I did everything I could to help them. So that's just being finished up right now. A film that I shot in Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan in the spring, like 3 years ago now. Like 3 years ago, right now, I was in Central Asia and we were shooting this film. And it's called Alishir's Gift. And it's a fictional story that I wrote, but it's all based on true stuff. And it has to do with um, struggles and Christianity and it's just a story about an uncle going to visit niece and nephew who are half Uzbek and half Kyrgyz. There's some history. It's a short film. I hope to finish that up soon. I'm working on developing an app that basically does a what we call a prayer wheel that just kind of walks you through 5 minute increment prayers with scripture and music and
Hmm.
lets you customize it. So like if you had a group that's going to Sao Paulo or something and you had 20 people going and you wanted them to all pray on the same topics in unison, you could develop a prayer wheel, load it into their app, and then they could, do a 30-minute prayer wheel, a 2 hour prayer wheel, or whatever. And it just literally walks you through it and it says, now pray for blah, blah, blah. So that's an app that's tied to some of the stuff we've been doing. So I think that's going to be kind of cool. It works, but it's not ready for prime time yet. Let's see what else I've been working on. There's a gentleman down in Tampa who does tutoring using the Cartesian coordinates, teaching kids that are struggling with math.
Hmm.
And so it's a ministry, math education, fun sports thing. And hopefully that's going to get started really quick. It's Kids in Sports Science. Yeah, kidsinsportsscience.com, I think. So that's not quite ready yet, but in the progress, working on that. Let's see what else am I working on. I'm working on a series of training videos with some missionary friends of ours who it's called Shoulder to Shoulder, and it's focused on men and women working side by side in ministry. And they are both theologically very capable. They have their PhDs. And they basically go through a lot of the scripture that people like to use to tell women to sit down and shut up in church,
Hmm.
and basically go through and show alternate ways of understanding what's being said there. And I feel like they're very, very capable in communicating. So it's just a training series that I've been helping them produce.
Wow.
That's all like ministry related stuff. I'm doing other stuff too. But
Well, we definitely have to stay connected because as you say your stuff, I connect. I'm one of those. I'm gifted at being a master connector with others. And so one of the things I love about the Connection Show, Matt, is as people talk, the Lord's given me, and it's starting to decline what it used to be because I'm 68 now, so the brain. But I remember when I was younger and and I worked in the bars, I used to be able to memorize a whole table's drinks and put it in my brain and compartmentalize it and then go back to the table and go, here's your scotch and soda, your bourbon and water,
Yeah,
and
I would not survive in that job. That's
and
not my gifting.
right. And servers, that people I was waiting on that worked in the
Yeah.
restaurant industry said, didn't you write this down? And I go, no, so I do the same with connecting. So as you talk,
Okay.
my brain went to like 6 people. I got to connect him with this one here. And it knows who to connect people with. So it's just a gift the Lord's given me. And
Mhm.
I had a friend of mine. I've been going, Matt, to the Reawaken tours with General Flynn and Eric Trump and Clay Clark, and they've been amazing. I went to Dallas and then Phoenix and San Diego. And one of the gentlemen there that I interviewed last week in San Diego, Doug Billings from the Right Side, he said to me, he goes, Jill, you are a master connector. If I need something, I call you because you have the answer to, me being medical or whatever it is. People call me and go, what should I do next? And I'll go, oh, call here or do this. So I definitely want to stay connected with you. I have some people I think that you would love to know.
Hey, I just thought of something that's actually kind of more fun related than ministries related. But my wife is an excellent singer, and we've been putting some effort into an online music stream that she does on a regular basis. We just shifted nights. So we're on Sunday evenings. She does live music broadcasts out of our recording studio. We have a recording studio, and she and I, like I kind of push the buttons, and she can focus on singing. And basically, people make song requests. But she's on Twitch.tv/MotherMirm. It's MUTHERMIRM. So you get on there and you do song requests. I mean, you revealed your age. So if you enjoy music from the 70s, that's her thing. She does a fantastic job singing songs from the 70s and 80s. I mean, she does other stuff. She does whatever people request, but her real wheelhouse is 70s and 80s. So you'll hear songs that you haven't heard in 40 years and go, oh, I love this song. I forgot about it. And so that's something we do that's actually kind of fun on an ongoing basis. And you can literally interact with us because people log into the system and they're chatting with us. They're making the song requests.
Oh, that's amazing. I definitely have her go to my calendar to book a interview with me too. I'd love to have her on my show herself.
All right.
Because we could have a lot of fun with that. Because my before Christian days, I have a very eclectic past. So my before Christian days, I'm celebrating, last month I was celebrating, Matt, 41 years of recovery from crack cocaine and alcoholism. And in my crazy days, my very first experience at 18 leaving home, I ended up getting backstage because my roommate was a Playboy bunny, got backstage to my Emerson, Lake and Palmer concert because I loved ELP and dated then one of the road crew and flew on private planes. But we also then, my roommate in San Diego was the #1 disc jockey in San Diego. So she emceed all the concerts. So we, in the 70s, we were backstage at every concert you could ever imagine, from The Who to Zeppelin to the Rolling Stones to Santana to Two Generations of Brubeck, you name it. And I just, I was in that record and radio scene. In fact, because you create apps, my stepson actually worked for Universal Music. He ended up getting hired by the VP one day and said, hey, I remember you getting your college degree in business music. And he said, I need somebody to be a project manager. So anyway, he recruited my stepson, and my stepson was responsible for creating the app that gave musicians their royalties with downloads on iTunes.
Oh, cool.
So he got a standing ovation from all the musicians because they got paid for the royalties of their music.
Well,
So
you were definitely in a hot spot when for that time period. There a lot happened. I've got some friends that I worked with a lady at American Airlines who was traveled, I think, 3 tours as the official behind the scenes photographer for Frank Zappa.
mm, yep.
And I think it was in the late 70s. A good friend of mine was the president of Playboy Records.
Well,
Um,
I used to go to Hef's mansion, so I got some stories to tell.
yeah, you might have actually met this guy.
Yeah,
And
it's
he was the guy that created the XM radio station Willie's Place, a guy named Eddie Kilroy. I produced some stuff with him back in the day, but he's a record producer, and
well, your wife
he
and
was
I could have
president.
some really good times together. So, well, I'm going to close for now and stay on after we hang up. I want to chat
Sure.
just off screen a bit. But everyone, please get your tickets now for the Branson International Film Festival. Go to bransonfilmfestival.com and show up. It's going to be an amazing time. So, Matt, thanks so much. I pray that your schedule will open up so you can be here. I'd love to meet you in person.
Very
And
good.
if the Lord wants you here, the doors will open and you'll be
Okay,
here.
hold it. Stop 1 second. I apologize. I would have asked a lot more questions beforehand, but you're in Branson?
Oh, yeah.
I missed that part. I thought you were okay. So that's excellent. Good to know.
Yep, I'm here.
My mother-in-law is just south of you in northeast Arkansas. So
Yeah. So definitely we got to get you to come to Branson for sure.
all right.
All right. And your wife will like it because my neighbor happens to be the general manager of King's Castle Theater here. And that's where they have New Jersey Nights playing, Dancing Queen, which is all your disco music, and Anthems of the Rock is all the 70s music. So you definitely have to come so I can take you to the King's Castle.
Miriam does a lot of ABBA, and she does Dancing Queen pretty regularly, and I think she loves it all the more when she heard it played at Colin Powell's funeral. Do you know he had it played there?
No, but
Dancing Queen by the military band. You got to check it out. It's got to be online.
Well, it's funny because my neighbor, who's the GM there, she actually called me and said, because she's in her 40s and I'm 6. She called me and said, Jill, she's from Scotland. She said, Jill, we're going to produce Dancing Queen at the King's Theatre. Could you give me a list of all your favorite disco music of the 70s so that I know what music we should have in the show? So all the music in the show I gave her.
There you go. It's your hit list. That's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm going to run. Everyone, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you in Branson soon. Have a blessed day. Thanks, Matt.
You're welcome.